Well, thank you both for coming in. I really do appreciate it. The session is over. I'll start with you, Assemblywoman. Just give me the grade as a member of the minority party as a freshman. How did the session go for you?
Well, from my perspective, I enjoyed it. I definitely learned a lot. And as you said, being a freshman, I didn't really have a reference as to what happened in previous sessions. And it was at times frustrating being in a super minority as we were in the Assembly. But I think we had a great class of freshman legislators. I enjoyed working with them. I have great respect for my colleagues both in the Assembly and the Senate. We had some great mentors with a lot of experience, a wealth of knowledge. And so I think given the circumstances, we were able to accomplish some good things. We worked together. And I had a great experience. It was really good. And
I know that you've had a chance to go to Carson City a lot before you were elected into the seat that you're in. So based on what you had seen, how the process had worked, how did it go for you now being on the other side and actually being in one of those seats?
Well, it was about what I expected. I knew going in, we were in a super minority, and I would, hats off to Speaker Frierson in Democratic leadership in the Assembly, is they were able to give us a voice. They were very collaborative in nature. We were able to work on a lot of issues. There were some issues that were driven through or rammed through, without a lot of input from our side. But for the most part, 90% of the bills, we voted together on. The other 10%, that's where we differed on some things, but they still allowed us to have a voice and allowed us to air our grievances, but in the end, numbers are the numbers.
Right. There's not much you can do about the math. The math is the math. Are there any issues really that you thought might be tackled, or do you also wanted to tackle this session, Assemblywoman, that didn't move through as you expected?
I think, well, from campaigning, I heard a lot at the doors, especially from women about healthcare issues, healthcare concerns, and there were some legislation that was brought forward involving those issues. I particularly had a bill, AB 141, that helped to tackle the cost of prescription drugs. So I hope going forward that we can do some more work on that. I think that's concerning for all Nevadans, that we pay too much for our medications. And so I think that's something looking forward that we want to continue to work on. Healthcare, also education. We made some great strides in education, but there's a lot more to be done, a lot more policy that we can work on and follow up on the legislation that was passed to see if it was effective, if it was working, if there's some adjustments that need to be made. So those are kind of my takes on what we did and what we can work on going forward.
And I think to expand on that, in a leadership role now, you'll be trying to, I would assume, help recruit new members to try to get the numbers a little more in your favor to tackle some of those priorities.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Going into this next election cycle, I think we need to recruit some good quality candidates. So that's what we're off to doing now. I think we need to develop a good agenda that reflects what the people of Nevada want, not just Republicans, but all Nevadans. And so we'll be working real hard on the interim and doing both of those things. And hopefully, we can win a couple seats back or a few seats back. Let's not be naive. I don't think anybody's getting in the majority in the Assembly. The Senate may be a different story, but I think we can certainly get out of the super minority and be effective, have some leverage moving into the next session.
That is tough, and we touched on that a little bit, but we use the term super minority, so that just means anything that could be veto-proof or tax measures, money measures. Was that ever hanging over your head as a thought of, man, we can't get out in front of some of these issues and stop them, or was there a sense that maybe there would be some solutions found that would be acceptable to Republicans as well? On most of the bills, we know that some did get pushed through, but I don't know, did you ever have a sense that things were just going to be pushed down your throat all session long?
Honestly, yes. I mean, when you're in the position we were in, it was frustrating at times to your vote. It mattered to you and to the constituents and the base that you represented, but to know at the end of the day, it really couldn't stop any policy or anything like that. And so I think we tried to make a concerted effort to, take a bad bill, and see what we could do with the other side to make it better, or maybe not as devastating, say perhaps on the business community or whatever that piece of legislation was aimed at. So I think that's kind of what we tried to do more, is work together, especially with the Senate, where they had a little bit more leverage to try to make pieces of legislation the best that we possibly could.
We saw a lot of national policies trickle down to the legislative level, and we saw, in a sense, the legislator bucking the trend on some issues, reproductive rights among them, with many other parts of the country. But do we still look like Nevada when you think of Nevada politics after this session? Was there much of a shift?
Well, I think we were discussing before you came on the air. Somebody brought up last week there was 1,200 registered lobbyists, which is almost 20 apiece when you count 63 legislators. And a lot of those were outside in national interest, trying to impose national politics on the state of Nevada. And I can tell you, why I moved here, why I stay here, why a lot of Nevadans are here, because Nevada's unique. We were a purple state, we're kind of blue. I'd like to see us get back to, to purple, because Nevada's got a great tax climate, great business climate. I think we're libertarian in nature, and I would hate to see that ruined by national politics. And to the credit of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the governor's office, is we work collaboratively, unlike in D.C., where there is complete partisanship. There was some bipartisanship at this legislative session, and hopefully we can keep that going.
You talk about the tax climate, for example, and when we talk about education funding as well, that came down to being, as we expected, one of the sticking points at the end of the session, whether or not to let the MBT expire, and then how much money the legislature had, so would it be necessary to extend it or not. That did become an issue. And Republicans seemed on board, at least in the Senate, to look for other alternatives. Maybe, and there were no definites, but maybe it would be to extend a sales tax or add a sales tax or something. But along those lines, from the numbers you saw, do you think the money was there to continue funding or to continue adding to education funding without continuing the modified business tax?
Well, I will tell you that it's my understanding that there's still money left on the table. I don't know what that dollar amount is, but talking to some Senate colleagues, there's still money left over, and the extension of the MBT wasn't really necessary to fund some of the things that needed to be funded. Specifically, when you talk about school safety, education, and some of the things that were attached specifically to that bill. If you look at how everything was set up, things were moved around so that everything hinged on Senate Bill 551, I believe it is. So there's going to be a challenge to it. There'll be because I believe it was the opinion of us and the Republicans in the Senate that the Constitution is pretty clear that any extension of a tax requires 2/3. The voters were real clear when they passed it and put it in the Constitution. And that effort was to completely undo that. And not necessarily for this session, but I think for the next session. I think we're going to come up on a fiscal cliff. The economy is either going to flatten out or dip down. And there's a lot of things that were passed this session that the price tag is going to be coming due in 2 years. And in order to fund it, they're going to have the ability to move the commerce tax or move some of these other taxes or lift sunsets without a new tax to fill the budget hole. So we believe that it requires 2/3 as the voters insisted and what the Constitution demands, and that's basically our position.
Do you think some of that money maybe was left on the table because of, let's say that the tax is struck down in the court. Let's say Republicans and businesses are successful. Do you think some of that would have been left on the table to backfill that just in case?
I would hope so. I would hope that there was a backup plan in case that occurs. There's the LCB opinion. We'll ultimately see, once litigation is filed. My understanding is that some people in the business community may do it, as well as there may be something from the Senate. I don't know exactly who's filing that lawsuit, but I hope there's a backup plan that we don't have to dip into the rainy day fund or going back into a special session to move funds around to fill the hole. But there was a lot of pork barrel spending at the last minute. There was a couple bills that, some things that were put on the table that, we spent some money on, that if we were going to put everything on the MBT tax and a constitutional challenge, maybe we should have put it on something a little less critical than school safety and some of the other things that were funded.
Assemblywoman, anything that you want to see now coming up in 2021 that you'd like to see Republicans really push for, that they would have a chance of getting through, that didn't make it through this time around?
Like I said, I think I'd like to see us continue to work on healthcare issue, prescription drug prices. I think education is something Republicans have always been very passionate about. I also think the business issues, you know, as Assemblyman Roberts said, Nevada has a great business economy. We have a low tax base, and that's a lot of reasons that businesses come here and stay here. And so I want to see that continue. Over the last 7-8 years or so, we've seen tremendous growth in our economy, in business growth, in job growth. So I hope that that will continue, and I know that for myself and other Republicans, that's something that we're very passionate about, and we want to continue to bring jobs here, businesses here, and continue that economic growth.
I think same question to you, Assemblyman. Anything that you can see some common ground in 2021 to work toward that Republicans really want to see passed?
Well, you know, I think we all have what's in the best interest for our state in mind. We may have a difference in what we think those are. Like I said earlier, I'll echo what Assemblyman Hardy talked about is, education. We know we need to fix that. That has been a hindrance for bringing business and attracting diversity to the state. I think we moved in the right direction to do that, but we need to look back and see, did we make the right moves? Did we do what we needed to do? I think another thing that we really need to take a look at is the business climate. We did a lot of things this session to reverse some of the positive business things that were done in 2015. In talking to some people in the business community, there were some businesses that were really looking hard at relocating from high tax states and high regulatory states to Nevada. And now they're taking a second look. They're saying, well, wait a minute, after this session, maybe we don't want to go to Nevada. Maybe we need to go to New Mexico or another state that is not moving in the wrong direction. So I think we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that we don't make in our efforts to improve some of the things that we ruin the things that make Nevada great. And so that's going to be some of the priorities for me.
Well, I really appreciate you both taking some time and coming in.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.